Welcome to Talk Heathen. Despite not being convinced of the existence of any god, we hold on to the hope that someone out there is the proof we've been searching for. Who knows? They might just call in on today's episode. So buckle up because the show is starting right now. Today is Sunday, March the 5th, 2023, and I am your host, Richard Gilliver, and joining me today is Nikki from Beats the Cult. Nikki, how are you doing? You've joined me on the non-profits before. It's good to have you back on. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much, Richard. It is good to see you again as well.
What kind of calls are you looking forward to today?
I'm looking for the call that is finally going to show that God exists so I can just do what's right and become a Christian and put it all behind me.
But what if he's not the Christian God?
It has to be the Christian God, right?
You're setting standards already.
I know. Oh, my goodness. Well, that's the one I've been told is true my whole entire life and every single day since, I was born. So I was, it's not like the God you believe in has anything to do with your geographical location or upbringing, right?
Exactly. Nothing at all to do with that. Let's talk about the show. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in on 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. Before we get started, we wanted to give you last week's results of the Talk Heathen to Me question of the week. As you know, each week we ask you, the audience, a question that you can respond to in the comments section of the video. We then pick out our 3 favorite responses and show them at the beginning of the next episode. That is this one. And then give you a new question for the week after. Last week, we asked you, what is the weirdest reason to pray for someone? And here are some of our top 3 answers. Number 3, Emergency Remedial Truth says, is it okay to pray God will get your buddy finally laid by someone who likes him enough not to charge? Number 2, Marcy Williams. The weirdest reason to pray for someone. Praying for body parts such as a heart or lungs is actually praying for someone to die in order to get the transplant. It's a very interesting take on that one. And our number 1 answer this week comes from Chris Huckins, who says the weirdest prayer for someone to pray that they would become skeptical, free thinker, resulting in loss of faith. That one's very interesting to me because which faith is it they're going to lose it? Is it all faith or is it a particular faith? Are you a Muslim praying that someone loses faith in Christianity and comes to you? That's a very, very interesting one. So every week we do this. The prompts for next week's question is summarize the God of the Bible in 4 words. Enter your best answer below the video in the comments, and next week we will reveal the top 3 answers. But let me ask you this, Nikki. How would you summarize the God of the Bible in 4 words?
Does it have to be like a formal sentence, or can it just be
just 4 random words?
Okay, just 4 adjectives. Let's see. Probably pimp, because he'd be pimping out hoes, definitely. Definitely homicidal. A homicidal, psychotic, narcissistic pimp.
That sounds exactly like the God of the Bible that we all know and love.
I think. And for those who are offended, these are adjectives that are a result of the God as it's defined in the Bible. This is not something that Nikki came up with. This is based on the killing of the babies and the, telling Moses to go and wipe out a whole tribe except for the women or the children who have the girls who have not known a man. So the virgins. So this is not just me. This is what I've been given to work with.
Yeah, you came from a religious background, so was that kind of stuff taught to you actively in that, or was it kind of brushed under the carpet when you were religious?
So it was both. It was taught to me daily, incessantly, and to this day it still is. I just don't interact with my parents as much as I did previously. But how it was taught to me was that his behavior was justified because it was a righteous anger and people were not comporting themselves in a manner that was acceptable to him. So he was permitted to do whatever he wanted and be as violent and as careless with people's lives as he so desired. So that's how I was raised. But in real life, or in actuality, his behavior is not acceptable.
And what did you obviously you came from a Christian background. What did you think of kind of other religions? Did you have access or exposure to those? So, for example, what did you think of Islam and the God of that religion in comparison to yours? Were you taught about that, or did you just kind of was that brushed aside as well?
So I was raised in the southern United States, where it's all Jesus and Republicans and football, and we don't really have a lot of Islamic influence in Tennessee and Georgia. Ironically, however, the neighborhood in which I live is becoming more of the people that own it are Muslim, so they're bringing in a lot of Muslims, which is fine. A lot of refugees, they need places to live. That's fine. So I'm actually now interacting with more Muslims for the first time in my life than ever previously, because growing up in Knoxville, Tennessee, I think a lot of Muslims are intelligent enough to know not to really live in areas that have Trump signs everywhere. So I didn't really have that access even before Trump came into office. So, but I was told that anybody who did not specifically follow the brand of Christianity that my parents did, they were wrong. The Baptists were wrong for whatever reason, and the Catholics, because there's no conduit between you and Christ. It's just you and Christ. You don't need a priest. Also, Mary is not a saint or a god. The Jehovah's Witnesses are wrong. I had this crush on this guy who was Jehovah's Witness and printed up all this stuff on Wikipedia about him, and my dad found it and like ripped it up. And he was just like, no. And it's just so, yeah, we were taught that their specific brand of Christianity was the only justifiable one and the only one that anybody should be interested in following. So, yeah.
There's some awesome answers. I'm interested to see what our audience comes up with to the answers of the question for next week. So in the comments section, give us your best answers and tune in next week as we reveal our top 3. We're itching to get to calls, but we do have a couple of announcements first. Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin. It's a 501c3 non-profit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. You can support Talk Heathen in many ways, and the ACA. We've got merch, and we've got all kinds of swag, t-shirt, hoodies, mugs, and as always, our limited edition t-shirts. Go to tiny.cc/merch ACA for all ACA merchandise. And please like the video and subscribe to the channel to enable notifications. Comment below on your favorite caller. You can become a channel member by clicking the join button below the video. You'll get custom chat emotes, and you will help perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and the atheist community of Austin. And you can send us super chats with a question or comment, which we will read live on air during the show. We have calls. Are you ready, Nikki? Are you excited?
Yeah. That's right.
We're going to talk to Anonymous, who's asking, could God be the universe?
Hello.
Anonymous, hello.
Hello.
I just was wondering about the universe, or if, because I used to be a Mormon, and I dropped that because I prayed to the thing that I got. Sorry, I'm nervous.
No, you're okay.
So I prayed about it to see if I get an answer. Like, I felt something when I got, what is it? A patriarchal blessing. I don't know if you know what that is in the Mormon church.
Yes, I do.
I'm not familiar.
Afterwards, I didn't, I prayed about it, but then I felt nothing.
For the sake of the viewers, Anonymous, would you like to just let them know what a patriarchal blessing is in the Mormon Church?
Oh, okay. I'm doing Anonymous? Some Googling, so.
Anonymous, are you there?
Hey, girl, you still there?
I'm going to return. Hello? I'm going to return Anonymous to the queue. We are still here. We'll take you in just a second when we get this tech issue sorted out. So Nikki, what do you know about Mormonism?
So I'm very limited in my understanding of Mormonism. The most recent experiences I've had was I briefly dated a girl who was raised Mormon, which was very weird because she was Black and she even admitted herself. Yeah. It was a little odd. But I don't, of course, being in the Southeastern United States, I do not have a lot of exposure to Mormons. I did have Jimmy Snow on my channel and he talked about it briefly. And I was on a layover in Salt Lake City and sat next to some really, really cool Mormon people, but that's kind of the extent of my exposure.
Yeah, Mormonism was started by, for those who don't know, Mormonism, and I'll try and get back to the caller soon when we get this technical issue sorted out. Mormonism was started by a man called Joseph Smith in Western New York in the 1820s and 30s. Yeah. And who wrote the Book of Mormon, which it described as a chronicle of early indigenous peoples of the Americas and their dealings with God. And Mormonism theology includes mainstream Christian beliefs with modifications stemming from revelations to Smith and other religious leaders. I'm going to try and bring the caller back in if we can, just for 1 second. Let's try and bring them back. Anonymous, can you hear us? Hello. Hey. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
So continue with what you were saying, please, and just tell us what you called in for.
If the universe is actually God.
So what makes you think that the universe might be God?
Or actually, if you don't mind, can I just ask you how you define God?
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. I just trying to search for answers.
Well, so if the universe might be God, so when you think of God, what type of traits do you expect that God to have, or how would you define that ideally?
A loving God that's not judgmental.
So love and judgment, those are human traits, right? You there, girl?
Anonymous? Did you hear Nikki's question? Okay, so we seem to be having a little bit of trouble with Anonymous. I'm going to just return them to the queue again. I'm not sure if it's an Anonymous or whether this is our technical difficulties. I am not quite sure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring another caller in, and we'll try with Branson, him from North Carolina, who wants Branson. To know, have you ever only studied Western religion, or have you studied Buddhism, Hinduism, etc.? Hello, Brandon. Okay. Branson, sorry.
Hey, how are y'all?
Hi,
I'm
Branson.
very good, thank you. How are you?
How are you?
I'm doing very well. Hope y'all are too.
Yes, yeah. Well, apart from being inflicted with COVID at the moment, I'm fine, but soldiering on. So I'm going to let you ask your question to Nikki, because I actually have studied both of those religions. But if you want to ask your question directly to Nikki, and we'll, let her answer and see what that brings forward. Branson?
Yeah.
What was your question?
If you had so my question to you is, have you studied other spiritual philosophies or different Eastern religions? Because I actually follow you on Twitter, and while I don't agree with everything you say, I definitely have that mutual respect for someone who questions what they are told. But I'm just curious, what's your background other than Christianity?
So, yes, I have studied them. The journey from Christianity to atheism wasn't just a direct jump for me. I did go through Yoruba, Hinduism, Buddhism, science of mind. I have chakra tattoos to demonstrate the foolishness of that phase in my life. The predominant reason that I focus on Christianity is because of my upbringing, where I live geographically, and the daily interactions I have with people in my environment and my family. Being an African-American woman, Christianity is an integral part of my cultural day-to-day existence. And that's why I focus on it predominantly, as my number one goal is to help Christian or African Americans specifically move out of Christianity into, hopefully, I mean, superstition aside, but more progressive beliefs such as Buddhism and potentially Hinduism, depending on, I guess, the sect. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I can ask another. What made you turn away from Buddhism or Hinduism, or what didn't make sense to you?
So I actually do incorporate several Buddhist rituals in my day-to-day life. Actually, well, you probably can't see it, but I mean, this is just, I like Buddhist statues. I like things like that. I have quite a few. I like the concept of Buddhism in Buddhism regarding trying to stop trying to change your environment and allowing things to flow. That suffering is a choice because it's trying to resist what's occurring in your, I guess, milieu, and assuming that you can even do much to change it. So it's more, for me, Buddhism is more of a philosophy, not necessarily a religion. And I meditate. I try to do it daily. It's really helped, especially, I mean, since I know you're following me on Twitter, you know, the past month of my life has been rather tumultuous. So I've actually been incorporating more Buddhist practices just in my coping mechanisms in my day-to-day life. So I still use Buddhist practices.
What about you, Branson? What's your experience of them?
So I just like learning. I love learning about ancient Egypt and the Indus River Valley civilization and just different spiritual practices. I just realized there's so much symbolism in them, and that can be like overwhelming a little bit. So I'm trying to like break it down a little slower. But ultimately, I think that the Western world interprets a lot of spiritual practices literally, and that has kind of turned a lot of Westerners away from spiritual teachings, just because it's so symbolic. And unless you're familiar with symbols, it just sounds like absolute, fairyland. Just doesn't make sense. So that's kind of where I sit. Just someone who just loves learning about different cultures and their symbols.
Do you think that, you said the spiritual aspect? What do you mean by the spiritual aspect of them?
So by spiritual, I mostly mean when they talk about raising your vibration and different things like that. That to me is a little bit more spiritual because there's just not a lot of science regarding consciousness. And so I also view consciousness as somewhat quote unquote spiritual, just because, it's hard to show someone consciousness other than a conscious being. You can show someone a conscious being, but not the consciousness itself. So when I use the word spiritual, I think more just things that cannot be proven or shown, at least at this time.
Do you think using that word, and I'm no particular problem with it, I'm just throwing this out there. Do you think using that word might be slightly confusing to a lot of people, because it does have a lot of kind of supernatural connotations with it? And
it's convoluted.
Yeah. Do you think that might cause people who you're talking to, if you're having these conversations, kind of to think you're talking about something more than you are talking about, somebody to attribute a supernatural element to what you're talking about, which it doesn't sound to me like you are doing?
So that's actually exactly why I do it, because I want people to ask the question, well, what do you mean by that? So which I greatly appreciate y'all doing, because I know so many people or I've come into contact with so many people who would just assume something and then run with it, and they would just completely misunderstand me. So the reason I use that word is really to build bridges and trying to have people understand that a lot of these spiritual teachings aren't as far-fetched and far off from just the way the universe works. Perfect example is the Hindu Trinity, Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. They're all representations of the creation of the universe, the preservation of the universe, and then the destruction. So it's a cyclical cycle that these gods represent. I'm not saying these gods are literal, but there's a spiritual, or at least more mystic aspect once you're familiar with the symbols of certain religions or spiritual practices.
And that's what religion was devised to do, right? Was to provide some type of structure, some type of understanding for things in our environment that we don't quite understand or comprehend just yet. And while I appreciate that, and I completely understand what you're saying, and I have done some pretty in-depth study of Eastern religions in conjunction with Western and also Middle Eastern as well, I guess I'm a little bit hesitant when it comes to applying those symbols to actual physical occurrences in the universe. For example, the creation, quote unquote, which who knows if it was actually created, the existence and the destruction. Those are physical happenings that happen within a physical realm that we can observe and research physically. So for me, there's kind of this blurred line between actually approaching the world scientifically and then taking what we don't know and then applying this symbolism to it. And I think that can be a little bit dangerous because when that bleeds over into the physical realm, for example, with astrology, people actually trying to use the stars and other things like that to interpret and understand what happens in the physical realm. I think that to me can be a little bit dangerous, but it does also depend on who is using the symbolism and how they're applying it to their everyday lives and how that affects others. But while I appreciate symbolism, I guess what I'm saying is I would just rather look at it in a physical, like more empirical perspective and just, what is science saying about this? Do we really need the symbols? I guess is what
I think that's where I was going to come in as well, because you said this about the scientific aspect, and then you also talked about the cyclical nature of the universe, and that doesn't necessarily match up with what we understand the science to be. And I was just wondering if you could kind of expand on that a little bit for us, Branson.
So we don't have any concrete proof of whether the universe is just started and it's just going to stop, or if there's going to be a big snap, the Big Bang we know, right? And then the theories on how it ends is a big crunch, which it comes from a singular point, it expands, then goes back to a singular point, and then it restarts.
There are a few theories. That's a big one, sure.
Yeah, that's not the kind of prevalent theory in science or in cosmology. The prevalent theory, as I understand it at the minute, is the kind of heat death of the universe. And I've heard of a few people who are kind of into kind of Eastern religions and Hinduism specifically talk about this cyclical nature and cite the big crunch. But that's not the leading theory that is out there at the moment. And I'm just wondering from your perspective, if you're leaning into that a little bit too much just to kind of fit the Hindu texts, or whether you're more interested in following what the science actually says.
Or potentially too, it could just be a attempt to allay personal fears and concerns about how life will end, and trying to find those answers to maybe bring some peace to yourself personally, which is perfectly fine. But to follow up on Richard's question, why are you aligning these symbolic ideas with what science has presented thus far, or at least trying to do that?
So science works on theories, and while a theory, gravity's a theory, but gravity's real. So I'm not saying just
to quickly interject, theoretically, do you know the difference between a colloquial theory and a scientific theory?
No.
Oh, okay. No problem. No big. So a colloquial theory, when people say the term theory, they're using it as if they are saying, I have a theory that this is how this particular thing occurs, but without much evidence behind it. When the scientists say the word theory, that means that this is a demonstrable, repeatable fact. It is empirically supported, that is consistent. So the theory of gravity, gravity is something that has been demonstrated, has a strict definition and how it occurs, and it is repeatable. Scientific theory is not the same as a colloquial theory. So the theory of natural evolution by natural selection, that is actually demonstrated repeatedly. That is something that is consistent. So a scientific theory and a colloquial theory are not the same in that regard. But that's a common misconception.
Okay. So what was the question before that?
Why are we using these religious symbols to, I guess, draw parallels to the real world rather than just kind of riding along with what science says until science doesn't have an answer, and then admitting there really isn't an answer, and then just kind of sitting with that?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the reason, in my opinion, and again, I've only been studying this for 3 years, so I'm fairly new to it. To my understanding, the Younger Dryas event had several cataclysms and wiped several civilizations. Whether you want to call them advanced or not, there's no proof that they were advanced, but sites like Göbekli Tepe show that there were traces of architecture and civilization. The reason that symbolism was so important for these cultures is because they understood that a comet can hit the Earth, floods can happen and absolutely destroy knowledge. So using symbolism, it's a lot easier for us to tie in more, or it's easier for them to transfer the knowledge rather than use specific symbols only for one culture. So like if we came across, or if our civilization ended and then they came across a bunch of our algorithms and formulas for the universe, most likely they would have literally no idea how to decipher it and what we were even talking about, unless they were able to find some sort of codex. Using symbols, it's a little easier to at least draw a general perspective. So I like the way science goes in the sense that these mythologies draw a very broad picture, and then science is able to come in with formulas and demonstrate certain parts of the story and give it some validity. Like there was no global Great Flood, but during the Younger Dryas period, sea levels did rise a substantial amount over, a couple years or a couple centuries.
So here's the kind of difficulty I'm having, and please correct me if I'm wrong at any stage of this, because I don't want to misrepresent you. You seem to be saying that kind of the Hindu, we'll stick with Hinduism at the minute, kind of idea was the using symbolism to broadly paint this picture of the universe, which they understand. Is that what you're saying? They actually understand the universe, and they're putting it in a symbolic manner, so that people in the future might understand it if civilization ends. Is that? Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, for the most part. Knowledge is a lot easier to pass down in stories. It's easy to be told. We were all told bedtime stories as kids. The difference is we were told the Three Little Bears. They were told about these gods creating the universe, and their story, in my opinion, thought, or at least actually happened.
My kind of field of study is religious studies, and symbolism. I agree there is a lot of symbolism in Hinduism. There really is a lot of symbolism in Hinduism. If you look at example for Hindu temples, they're created on a kind of it's almost like a grid system, if you like, and each part of the temple corresponds both to the outer universe as a whole and the inner universe of the person. So there is a lot of symbolism in Hinduism. The part where I'm having the disconnect with you is that the symbolism is an accurate representation of the universe. And I think if we actually have a look at that, it's a representation of their mythology, but that mythology doesn't necessarily line up with what we know to be of the universe. And, you know, coming back to the example that you gave earlier, the kind of cosmic crunch, that is an idea about the universe, but it's one of many, and it's certainly not the leading one. So there seems to be some kind of disconnect. It's kind of it's moving towards a little bit of the God of the gaps. I think talking about, and you know, I just wondered what you thought about that.
Just a quick interjection as well. In the event that some futuristic alien species finds the human race, I would be less likely to believe that a type of esoteric cultural symbol such as Krishna or Brahma, Shiva would be easier interpreted by them than just a mathematical formula or physical equation that they could come to understand on their own. For example, what I'm saying is, let's say that humans are wiped out. If a species comes and finds some type of relic from our time, and it's a religious symbol, I think they would have to do more research to understand what that meant, rather than if they found a relic that represented a mathematical equation or something else that they could possibly come to understand on their own. Since physics and mathematics are consistent, logic is consistent, I would think that a religious symbol would actually convolute things more and make it more difficult to understand and transfer a message than something more empirical or straightforward, such as math or logic. But yeah, continue with what you were saying, answer Richard's question. I just wanted to say that.
So they wouldn't know the difference between a religious symbol and the number 3. You know what I mean? These are just technically everything is a symbol, all numbers and alphabet. So they're all symbols. It's just, you could 100% be right. You know, they could, if they did exist and they come, they may be able to decipher the equation way easier than they would a story about.
I think the difficulty we're having is that, what kind of math does and other abstract concepts, for example, logic, they are descriptions. They describe how the world actually works. Right. So it doesn't matter whether we're here or whether you're an alien on a planet 25,000 light years away. The same, as far as we understand it, the same laws apply throughout the universe. So they would be able to kind of understand those mathematical symbols relatively easily, rather than kind of a folklore which has come up from a particular region of the earth and reflects the beliefs of those people about the universe at that time. And I think we're kind of getting these, I think you're getting a little bit convoluted. And this, I would say, please look into this more, because you're definitely going both Hinduism and Buddhism, which are what you called about, and we haven't really had a chance to talk about, are both great subjects to discuss, and the subjects I'd like to discuss more on this show. So please do call back in future, and let's continue this conversation, because for me it's really fascinating. But kind of in the meantime, I'd implore you to kind of move away from the kind of symbolic aspect and look much more at the kind of academic work that's out there on the symbolism, because symbolism is there in Hinduism, but you can actually look at the academic work around it, rather than kind of reading these esoteric books which kind of vaguely connect Hinduism with the universe and don't really touch upon what modern science is actually saying. So,
or any other religion, all types of religions have, I believe it's cosmogonous is the term, cosmogonous ideas and accounts of how the world came to be. But what unites all of these things and what we can all come to terms with and get on the same page with is science and empiricism.
Yeah, Branson, thank you very much for your call.
Thanks,
we do appreciate it. It's been a good call, and I would like you to call back again in the future if you can. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to drop you quite that quickly.
No.
Sorry, Branson. No,
Send
that
me
was a
some,
really good call.
Comment on my tweet, Branson, regarding the because I tweeted out about the show that I'll be on today. So comment on that, please, and I'll follow you, and we can catch up then.
Yeah, that was a great great call, and I like calls like that, which kind of take it away from the direction that we normally get, the kind of Christian direction and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes. So talking about this show, our show, you can support us on Patreon, and you can do that by going to tiny.cc/PatreonTH. We now have a channel that houses all of the ACA shows in audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts, and you can become a part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan-run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. And also, in case you didn't know, Talk Heathen has a TikTok, and we will be going live there before the shows on a Sunday. You will unfortunately get to see this face there. I do apologize about that. And you can go and subscribe and join in the pre-show on the Talk Heathen TikTok, which, if you're on TikTok, is called Talk Heathen. So it's don't search for Talk Heathen, search for Talk Heathen. So I'm going to take another call. I'm going to talk to Jeff, him, from Ohio. Jeff, how are you doing?
Hi, Jeff.
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Very good, thank you. So, well, the question you wanted to ask was, if the supernatural can only be attested to by its effects on the natural world, does all evidence of the supernatural have to appeal to a God of the gaps argument? Would you like to explain that in a little bit more detail?
Sure, as best I can. Mainly, it's been my anecdotal experience that God of the gaps has a particularly negative connotation associated with it. And the more I thought about it, the more I came to believe that there is no other way to demonstrate the existence of the supernatural, since I personally believe that the supernatural can only be attested to by its effect on the natural world. So that means that I can only observe things within the natural world, and then I must rule out natural causes in order to have any reason to believe there may have been a supernatural cause.
Nikki, what do you think about that one?
So supernatural means outside of nature. And if something is outside of nature, it means it cannot be observed within nature. So if you are observing an effect or something in your environment that causes you to question, you're starting to eliminate possibilities. As you eliminate natural causes, it would be my understanding that more than likely you just haven't found the correct natural cause, because if it's supernatural, then you wouldn't have been able to even necessarily dictate or understand what cause it would be anyway. So I don't actually think supernatural, quote unquote, is a thing because of that. I do agree with you that natural causes are more than likely and what is the cause of what you're trying to interpret. But if it's supernatural and outside of nature, then you wouldn't be able to detect it as a cause anyway.
Right.
So
right.
I'm aligning with you on that.
That's sort of the nature of the God of the gaps argument, is that, well, it's a fallacious argument, in my opinion, but because you can never truly exclude all possible natural explanations. But the only way to appeal to something that's not natural is to say, I have exhausted all natural possibilities, right? So it must be something that's not natural. And it seems to me that
exhaust all natural possibilities. I just think we're limited.
Yeah, I agree. But it seems to me that the only way someone who believes in the supernatural could possibly expect to provide evidence for the supernatural is to say, here's this thing in the natural world that has no natural explanation. I don't see any other way that you could possibly argue for the existence of the supernatural.
But it's really not even an argument for the existence of the supernatural, because that is, of course, as you said, the God of the gaps argument. Simply saying because we don't have an explanation in the natural world thus far, it means it's supernatural. That can't actually be demonstrated, so that claim can't even be made within any intellectual honesty.
Yes, I agree. And my point is that I see no alternative. And that's why I don't see how anyone can believe in the supernatural.
I see an alternative. The alternative is to say, I don't know. If we don't have any natural explanations up to that point, you shirk the supernatural lie, and you say, well, I don't know until we find something.
Yes.
But yeah, it's not working for them.
Yeah, I think
I don't see any other alternative argument for the supernatural, and that's why I don't believe in supernatural. So this seems to be the only one that could possibly work, and I don't see how it could work given that we're incapable of eliminating all possible natural explanations.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because the kind of question is if the supernatural can only be attested by its effect on the natural world. And I think we've also got to look at, is it possible? Is it possible that the supernatural could be out there, that there could be a God out there, and it have no action in relation to the natural world whatsoever? And I think this is where skepticism, I think, for me is really important, because we could say that yes, we could accept the possibility that there is a God out there that is completely supernatural and it's completely unrelated to the natural world. The important part for us is, when are we justified to believe in that God? And that's where skepticism comes in, because unless you have any kind of justification for believing in it, what is it, and why are you believing in that God to begin with? If it has no interaction with the natural world, if why are we accepting that? And there are plenty of people out there who kind of do believe in these deistic prime mover gods who don't interact with the natural world. And this becomes a serious, your question becomes a serious question for them, when because they do believe in a supernatural entity that doesn't affect the natural world. So why is it that they believe that? And I think that's what your question really raises an important spotlight on.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate you taking my call.
Of course.
No problem. Thank you for calling in. We appreciate you. I love calls like that, the kind of speculative calls, that kind of, because it on the face of it, it seems like as a bunch of atheists, we can sit around and just kind of discuss that, and it can be like an echo chamber, but you can ask that question.
Oh, sure.
About, that doesn't disclude that there might be a God that exists in only a supernatural fashion that doesn't in fact interact with that. So the question then becomes, when is it justified to believe in that call? So yeah, one of the things we like to do on this show is, like, we like you to comment, we like you to give us super chats, and Greg Makowski has very kindly done that for $4.99. And he says, great guests. Thanks. No, thank you.
Greg.
We really, really do appreciate you watching the show. We appreciate the super chat. If anyone else wants to give us a super chat and
send money, guys.
Get your comment out there, and comment on the host, comment on the topics. Feel free. If you don't have that confidence to get on the phone and you want to say something, send a super chat. We'll talk to you in that way as well. Also, you can check out the newest episode of the flagship show of the ACA, The Non-Profits, which will air live at 3 p.m. Central today at tiny.cc/YTNP. And the ACA wants... I always feel like doing that kind of old military poster thing on when I do this announcement. The ACA wants you to know what is going on in our community. And for that, we've got an updated website, which you can get to by visiting www.atheist-community.org, where you can learn about the organization, its policies, and how you can get involved. We want to hear from you. Really, really do want to hear from you. I'm a great one for I love responding to emails. I had a couple last week that I responded to, and I'm very excited to talk to people. We want to know what you liked, what you thought was effective, and more importantly, what you think we can do better. And you can email us at tv@atheist-community.org. and let us know. We are going to take another call. Nikki, are you enjoying yourself?
I am having an excellent time. I've been wanting to do this show for a while, and I'm living the dream right now. So yeah,
it's an amazing show, and we are very happy to have you on. I'm going to take line 6, Wesley, from West Virginia. Wesley, are you there?
Everybody doing? Hi, how's
hey,
everybody
Wesley.
doing?
Hi, doing well. How are you doing, Wesley?
I'm okay. I just wanted to clarify and make as clear and plain as possible what hell really is.
Which hell?
Well, hell is a period of time of 7 years. It's on Earth. The lake of fire written in Scripture is really a lot of nuclear bombs. In America,
I want to quote. I'm sorry. Hell is a time on Earth, 7 years. So you just described like my bachelor's and my master's degree, basically.
Well,
trying to be funny.
the hell begins. The hell begins when the scriptural wheel in the wheel, the color of beryl, makes the fire enfolding in itself. What does the fire enfolding in itself sound like to you?
I actually have a question before we kind of get into it. Are you
sound like a nuclear bomb mushroom cloud?
It sounds like a lot, and it sounds very interesting. I just want to make sure I understand because are you? I'm assuming you're a Christian.
I'm Jewish, and I believe that Jesus Christ is God, and there is no other God beside him.
Ooh, give me a second to process that.
This is kind of back to the Hindu call where I think a little bit here, where you kind of you're saying, does that sound like a nuclear bomb?
That was a nuclear bomb, Wesley.
There were things in there are things in Scripture. Which Scripture is it you kind of take to be authoritative then? If you're a Jew who believes that Jesus Christ is God, are you
like more of a cultural Jewish, like your culture, your heritage, or along Richard's point?
In Ezekiel is a wheel in the wheel the color of beryl. Plainly, what that is a nuclear bomb built into a green Volvo station wagon car. It shall be placed at height in Chicago.
So where were you getting
Chicago?
Wesley, the question I asked you was about the kind of scriptures you were getting from, and I don't remember reading any about any green Volvo cars in Chicago. I don't
think it's the scripture I'm wanting to know where Wesley's. I want to know what Wesley. So THC isn't quite legal here in Georgia, but Wesley, if you have any suggestions for a strain, it sounds like you may have some good ones going on, and I don't think it's legal in West Virginia either. But
right, so let's get back to the scripture. Let's get back to the scripture itself, because we don't want to spend all day on being preached at. So, which scripture is it that you're kind of taking this from?
Oh, Beryl. Ezekiel 1:16. King James Version, Ezekiel 1:16. The appearance of the wheels in their work was like unto the color of a beryl. And they,
Beryl is green. Beryl
yes, it is
green.
Yes. Yes.
The wheel in the wheel is a nuclear device built into a car.
So here's the problem I'm having with kind of what you're saying. You're kind of retrofitting our modern knowledge into the scriptures, and there were 4 different words for hell from the kind of biblical scriptures, which all meant different things and kind of got amalgamated into what we understand now. Now we know this is the case, as kind of religious scholars and people who study religion, we know this to be the case. And then you're missing all that part of it out, the important part when it comes to the actual understanding of what these words originally meant and the context of them. And you're jumping into kind of personal interpretation, retrofitted into the modern world.
I have personally seen the device and seen the car.
Wesley, quick question. Are you playing with us? You have one of those easy, like Sunday morning Sundays, and because you're, I mean, when you rewind this and listen back, and and being from the religious community, I've heard a lot of wild things, and sometimes it is hard to differentiate between who is being truthful and who's just playing. But I mean, are you playing with us, Wesley?
No, and when that goes off, the hell begins. Jesus shall say, "Come up, I like them." And all of those in the city.
Right, Wesley, I apologize. I have dropped you because when this is a show where we like to talk to people about what they believe and why they believe it. It's not a show where you just get to call and tell us what you think is going to happen based on your religious scriptures. I'm not interested in that.
I was kind of hoping that Jesus was going to roll up in the Volkswagen. In that barrel Volkswagen, just kind of sitting back, leaned back.
Yeah,
that's how he would come
if
back.
Jesus had done that, if he'd have taken documentary footage and interviewed Jesus, and Jesus was telling him he was going to call the show next week and tell us that'd have been a much more interesting call. But when you're just sitting there telling us about what you think is going to happen. Yeah, I'm not necessarily sure he was playing, but I'm not interested in taking preachers. That's not what we're interested in at all on this show. We do have another super chat from the Snark, who gave us €2. I think that is. I'm confident, but I leave my place to theists. Thank you very much for the super chat, the Snark. We have got a couple of more announcements to make. If you are going to be in the Austin area on March 26th, consider joining us at the Free Thought Library for the live broadcasting of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen will be hosted by Secular Rarity, Christy Powell, and the Atheist Experience will be hosted by Jim Barrows and Secular Rarity. We really hope you can join us there. It's something I've always wanted to do. I'm not in Texas. You might not have noticed that. I want to go there. And, I know when I read these announcements, I think, I'm really jealous of the people who get to go there. I want to go to the Free Thought Library. That's for Cindy Plaza. If you are local to the Austin area, we are in great need of additional crew members for the shows. And if you're interested in assisting with video, audio, or call screening, you can attend our live shows. You can email us at tv@atheist-community.org. I can't speak, but I will do my best. I am COVID laden. I do apologize that with you. I'm a bit under the weather today. The production team will be in touch. We have got a couple of calls. I'm going to take another Wesley, I think, from Massachusetts. Wesley from Massachusetts, how are you?
I'm doing very well, and I want to thank you for putting on this show and hoping to change the mindset of the general populace of humans.
Thank you, Wesley.
Was a fundamentalist. I was a fundamentalist Baptist myself, and I think that what's important to me is that young people today who have all kinds of advanced knowledge than they had thousands of years ago actually want to be critical thinkers and want to think about what's logical and what's not. And if they
in
are
some
taught
cases
that there's a burning hell.
Well, TikTok is definitely about religion, but other topics, young people today aren't as skeptical as they should be.
Well, it's surprising, but I get sad every time I see brainwashed Mormons, brainwashed Baptists, brainwashed people who think that they're that they really have this heaven above and hell below. And one of the things that I had to think about was the cognitive dissonance that we suffer when you are told that there's an all good, all loving God as a child. And you're told he's all about love, he's all about good, but he'll burn you forever if you're bad. Now, that just doesn't make any sense. And if people stand back and they ask themselves quiet, without noise, without people to interpret the Bible for them, just alone, outdoors, maybe under a tree, and ask themselves, would an all-loving, all-good God create a place where people would be tortured, even if it's for a minute? But this is, of course, for eternity. And that, there's no sense there at all. And so then maybe that can form other questions in your mind to say, maybe what I was taught as a child isn't true. And why was I taught this? And how can I discover more? And one of the answers is read the Bible. I mean, the thing is filled with horrors. And so if you actually do read it by yourself without noise, without ministers telling you what a passage means or anything like that, I think you'll find a lot of passages in there that you'll realize it's written by men in a time when we didn't have electricity, in a time where people wanted their children to be theirs. And that explains why God commands people to go kill other people.
I'm really interested in this, Wesley, because I didn't grow up religious at all. So I always find it fascinating when I kind of get people who are calling in who were religious and who have come out of that. So I'm interested in kind of the process of you doing that. I know you've just said about reading the Bible without noise. And I was just curious if you kind of went through a process of looking at other religions, or whether you just, if like a lot of Christians, they want to learn more about their own religion, and they look at their own religion in more detail. So I'm just interested in what was your story a little bit more.
Well, I think that my story is pretty much a mainstream story of people that get themselves out of religion, where you're the type of person that wants to know what's true. And what's true isn't your truth or my truth, as Richard Dawkins says. Truth is what is. And so I wanted to be part of that group that had knowledge, that knew what actually was. And I think it was a green Volvo that he was talking about, not a Volkswagen. But these people, I mean, obviously, when you're younger, I think you have more of a clear mind, maybe when you're in your 20s. But when you're taught in churches to pray, that's one big brainwashing scheme, because you're praying to something, in my opinion, that doesn't exist, but you're praying to something and dedicating your mind to that. And do you really want to do that? And wouldn't it be better to be living in the world of how things work and how our work planet around us? So I actually, one of the first things that brought me out of my cult was questioning Noah and the ark, questioning how many species of animals are there on the earth. And I grew up in a farming community, so I know how many animals one person can care for. And if you're dealing with two of everything of every species. And not only that, this takes you back to the hell topic that you brought up as well. Why would an all-loving God kill anything and torture anything through drowning and through, fear, and mothers with babies trying to hold them up in their, maybe they're on the rooftop of their house? Is this something a loving God would do? And the answer is no, it isn't. And let's be very clear.
Some people say yes. Some people say that it is. Just to play the devil's advocate for myself, growing up in the church, I was taught the same stories, the same myths, and was told these absolutely happened. And this is reinforcement for complying with God's wishes and how to avoid the same fate. Because if you do something to displease him, he is justified in harming you. Because as Bill Cosby said in The Cosby Show, I brought you into this world and I could take you out of this world. So that's how I was taught, that the right way to do things was to pray and to continuously consort this God. Because if you do not, he's going to see your dismissiveness as an insult, and he's going to do something drastic to get your attention, almost like a child who is attention hungry and does destructive things to get the attention of the person that they want. So that, I mean, you're right. I agree. The God has not been demonstrated to exist. When you're praying to yourself. But being raised in that environment, those were the reasons given to continue to pray, to continue to please the God.
Those reasons, if I may, are part of the noise. You yourself have your own individual mind. Your parents really don't know what you think, and nobody else knows what you're thinking. And we don't have any thought crimes, thank goodness, in this country yet. But
oh no, we have thought crime.
There's a wonderful.
Been on TikTok.
Well, there's a one. Oh, okay. There's a wonderful poem that I want to cite. It's short. So we were taught, so we believed. The priest continues what the nurse began. Hence, the child imposes upon the man. That's a wonderful verse too. It was in this writing called "The Truth About Jesus Christ" or something. It was written by a rabbi. But yes, what you're saying is cemented by song, by your hymn singing. Didn't you love to sing hymns? You did, didn't you?
My mother, actually, we didn't sing hymns. We went to one of those contemporary Christian churches that sung Stephen Curtis Chapman. So we were super cool like that. But when I was actually in utero, my mother told me that she would sing hymns to me and that she would read Bible verses to me in order to indoctrinate me to become a Christian, even before I was born, and basically dedicate myself to Christ. So no, we didn't go to one of those traditional churches. We went to those churches where the pastor wore like flannel, and they had like a praise and worship group, and we had the big projector up. So no, but no, she did sing hymns to me when I was in the womb. So
were you taught to tell your friends about Jesus?
Oh, absolutely. We used to go stand outside of Kroger and accost people with flyers, and I will never forget. Because I was raised evangelical. So evangelist is how I was raised. And I remember on 2 separate occasions, this upbringing I had really affecting me. The Kroger, we would stand outside of the Kroger and pass out flyers. And I remember this woman coming out of Kroger, and I gave her a flyer, and I was like, hey, this is from our church. This is about Jesus. She said, oh, I'm Wiccan. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I just remember she was buying a bunch of Wiccan. Excuse me, Wiccan. She's Wiccan.
Oh, Wiccan.
Like
Wiccan. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I told one of the girls, I was like, hey, I tried to give this flyer to this lady, and she said she was Wiccan. She was like, she's a witch. And I'm like, oh, a witch. And I remember that particular experience. And then after like 10 years later, maybe not 10, but like 7 years later, my parents, one of their many attempts to get me to submit to Christ, I became a Christian at 17 again for the 10th time, and went to work at Ruby Tuesdays and was telling people about Jesus. And I was just like, Jesus loves you so much, and he's great. And this one dude, Nick, I'll never forget him. He was just looking at me like, you are making me so uncomfortable. So yes, I was taught and raised to proselytize. And it's very embarrassing
in a way,
to do that.
Can I ask you, I had to face my past, and I had to realize that, when I was 7, I went to Camp Good News. What did I know at 7? What did I know how to read at 7? But when I did proselytize, or when I went out there and told people my evangelical stories, I was being trained to lie.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know these things. And you're being trained to say, God loves you. But a young mind, you're not fully developed. Your mind isn't fully developed. Some people say, some
25.
scientists don't believe it's until 20. Yeah. So when you're 7, because you said it was 10 years before you accepted Christ as your Savior at age 17. And
oh, no, I did it like 10 times before that. That was just like the most recent.
So in my world, I'm just hoping that young people understand it's important to read the Bible by themselves alone and really critically analyze it. Read the account of Noah in the ark. Read about how the stars shall be for signs and for seasons. What signs? We know that astrology doesn't work, and you mentioned that before on the show. I just want to tell you one quick thing, is if you take a horoscope, a newspaper or your favorite place, and you cut it all apart and you cut the titles off each month, right? then you mix them all up and you hand the readings to a friend and you say, which one is yours? You keep the title. You've numbered them all so that you know which one is which. But then you begin to realize that they could be for anything. And
Yes.
Wesley, I just want to jump in real quick based on something you've just said. And you said kind of, read the Bible by yourself without the influence of preachers or pastors or any of those people. I think that's really good advice. But do you not think there's a danger in reading it solely by yourself? That you might come up with some new wild interpretation? Because we've heard already once from one of the callers, in fact, a couple of the callers tonight, from different religious perspectives who've read the scriptures and then kind of come up with interpretations of them to kind of fit them into the way they observe the world to be now. And do you not think that's a danger without taking any guidance whatsoever? Because of course we have religious scholarship, and there's a lot of good scholarship out there, and even from practicing Christians, there's a lot of good scholarship out there which actually go into the detail of how the books were formulated and talk about a lot about the kind of rational side of what you're talking about in the formulation of the texts and the interpretation of the text and the different ideas that were around. Do you not think that would be a more productive and safer environment, in a more academic environment into which to read the Bible, than just taking it off on your own and reading it and possibly having that danger of your own interpretation?
Well, the Catholics thought that for thousands of years, and they wouldn't let any of their people read it. But I think that, no, I don't think there's a danger in it. And if God wrote it, wouldn't you think it's the most precious thing that you have in your household? But what you find out is the vast majority of Christians don't really know the Bible at all. They don't.
Oh, they haven't read it.
If you were to go, they'll read their little sections that the minister wants them to read, that their prayer groups want them to focus on. But they won't read about Hosea 13:16, where it talks about, going into another community and Samaria will fall and slice all the pregnant women, killing them and their babies too, that God's commanding this. They won't read the section that talks about the girl who was married to an older man. She was probably 12. And so what's the solution? Oh, God's solution is to have the men of the city take her in front of her parents' home and literally stone her to death. So these are things that your minister doesn't tell you. So what I tell people is, please read it. If you really are convicted that this God wrote this for you, then don't you think this is something that deserves your full attention and complete attention? But don't go to concordances. Just read the thing yourself and decide whether that's a loving God or not. Because the reason why I was brought into the church was because Jesus loves me. And I'm supposed to spread that love throughout. And it's supposed to be altruistic, not something where you get to heaven for being good, or you stay away from hell for being good. You're supposed to do good. From what Santa Claus said, be good for goodness sake. And
well, that's the issue, is most Christians do not read the Bible. And that's the problem. I ask my brother the same. I'm like, why haven't you read this? You advocate for the religion. You need to read it. The last girl I was dating, she's just like, I'm like, have you read it? No, I'm not going to read it. Why? Because I already know if I read it, I'm going to have questions and I'm going to want to move away from it. And I'm like, well, maybe that's a good thing. Read it, or does not speak to a bigger issue. So.
And psychologically, that cognitive dissonance is very difficult to deal with. You've got your whole society, your whole world is going to church and meeting your Christian friends and proselytizing. Now you have to save your face. You've gone up and testified in front of people. How could you then say that what you've been telling them isn't true? Well, it depends on whether you're an adult or not. And an adult can receive corrective information and be joyful about it and say, thank you for teaching me that, so I won't go out and give misinformation anymore. And I tell people that. I'll tell Christians that. You should be thankful if someone corrects you. Don't hang on to yourself and say, I'm right, I don't want to hear it, let's not talk about it. The very two things we shouldn't talk about are politics and religion. I tell them, don't silence my freedom of speech. The very two things we must talk about today are politics and religion, because if we don't, there won't be a planet for children to survive on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we do need to talk about it. Obviously, that's what we're doing here, and it's what we do every week. Wesley, thank you very much for your call. It's been very insightful.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much. And we do appreciate. See, this is what I like about doing this. You get to talk to people with so many different viewpoints, and it brings it together. And we get a lot of people listen to these shows who come from religious backgrounds, who may come from a small town or a small church community, who've only heard one interpretation. And it's so good for them to get to just sit here and listen to different ideas and people from different backgrounds. And like people like Wesley who were saying, go out and read the Bible.
Please read it.
Because, a lot of people in these communities, they've got their pastors saying to you, atheists don't want you to read the Bible. Atheists don't want you to know the word of the God.
Please read the whole thing.
You did.
Read the whole thing. Of course. But I didn't read it until after I became an atheist because I was thinking, well, goddamn, I need to know. I need to make sure that this lack of belief is actually justified. I want to make sure that the lack of belief is actually rooted in research and actual effort and blood, sweat, and tears. I don't just want to stop believing. And I think that's a misperception a lot of Christians have is that, oh, you just had this bad experience or you're angry at God. No, not at all. The lack of belief I have is 100% predicated on the fact that there is no empirical, justifiable, repeatable evidence for the existence of a deity. It has nothing to do with emotion. It has nothing to do with my parents are annoying as hell, or I was raised in a horrible environment. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the lack of evidence. If there was a God, I would believe and just be mad at it.
Yeah, but we do have more calls to take. Before we do that, we have the top 5 patrons. As the guest, Nikki, you get the pleasure of trying to pronounce everybody's name.
Oh, this is going to be exciting. Oh my goodness. Okay. Top 5 patrons. Thank you all so much for your monetary contribution. Please continue to do so. Number 1, Dingleberry Jackson. I feel like that's the easiest. Number 2, Ayame. 3, Oops, all singularity. 4, Devor Vagin. 5, Kalivi Helveti. And that's an honorable mention, M.E. Burns. So thank you all for your financial contribution. And for those who have not subscribed, please do so.
Yeah, we do appreciate the patrons very, very much. I am a patron of this show. I have been for a very, very long time. And I'm very happy to give my support. And I appreciate other people who also do so. We have more callers. I'm sure all of our listeners will be very happy to know that we are going to talk to Rick from Canada, who wants to talk about the biblical flood.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey Rick, how are you?
Good, I'm good. Yeah, no. So I wanted to ask: have you guys ever heard of Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980?
Yes, I have.
Sure.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. So in the eruption, we watched fossils being formed within days. We watched something that appears to it looks exactly like the Grand Canyon on a smaller scale was carved by a mudslide within hours. You got the geological columns laid with rocks, ash. There was upside down trees, just like the geological column that you guys hold to. So given those facts, how can you justify?
That was a very, very straightforward introduction, Rick. I think it's the first time I've talked to you. Okay, so we know that fossils can be forced by cataclysmic events. That's not something that's not known. You know, they get caught in mudslides or things like that, and then they get buried under the ground and they become fossilized due to the pressure that's been put on them. I'm not sure why you're kind of leading in very enthusiastically with that, like it's a problem. We know that this is the case.
What is if you do not mind, can we skip to the point that you would like to make?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So my point is is that what we see with the geological column and the fossils, everything we see that you guys associate with evolution or billion-year-old planet can all be explained by the flood. So I can understand you guys take your side and the Christians take their side, but I just don't understand why we have.
First of all, let me just stop. There are plenty of Christians who are scientifically literate enough to understand that the Great Flood never occurred. There are also plenty of Christians who are scientifically literate enough to understand evolution and other concepts as well. So it's not just non-believers who advocate for these things. So I just wanted to just stop that right there.
I'm also very interested in which flood you're talking about.
He's talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh ripoff.
Flood, whether you want to talk about Anki or whoever you want to talk about, but you said science.
Where is the evidence? So where is the evidence for the Rick? Where is the evidence for this global flood?
Where is the evidence for it?
Yeah.
We find trillions of fossils globally, right? We found the creatures mixed side by side.
That's not evidence for a global flood. We have an explanation for finding fossils globally.
So, Rick, what are we getting to here? Like, what? So, the flood is just a symptom. What is the actual point you want to make? Because I'm sure that you didn't come to believe based on the flood. What?
No.
Sure.
The point I'm trying to make is that I hear you guys constantly saying the flood has been disproven by science, but that's not the truth at all. The fact is we got to meet in the middle. Then we got to ask ourselves what's more logical. And in my opinion, and really like the honest opinion, a flood is far more plausible than the stretched imagination that you call literate science, right?
What do you mean by Rick? What do you mean by the flood has been disproven by science? Because I didn't present to you that the flood had been disproven by science. What I asked you is what evidence is there for a global flood? So science.
Let's walk through that. Yeah, let's actually walk through that, because let's put science aside. I understand the qualification, you guys. I mean, non-believers aren't the only ones who deny the flood, but let's walk through an actual global flood. How do you think a global flood, because let's think about this. We're talking about enough water on the planet to exceed the sea level by tens of feet, where everything is underneath it. So let's talk about how physically that would happen. Let's walk through this.
Okay. Well, the water, according to the Bible, it rained as well as it came from the earth, sprung up from the earth, right?
Okay. Where is the water in the earth
that's what I'm saying. The longest hole ever dug was by Russia. It was 8 miles. And do you know what they found down there? Take a guess.
You tell me.
It was water. A whole bunch of water down there. So the deepest that we've ever dug in the earth, we hit water, right? And they were shocked. They're like, we didn't know that was there. So the fact that the Bible says, are you telling me the earth can't hold that water? Is that your position?
No, I'm actually really curious as to know like why this is important. I'm assuming that you're a Christian, and you buy into the story of the global flood. So even if there is water in the earth, maybe that was not the right direction to go. Let me restructure. Let me ask you this. Where do you think the story of the global flood actually came from in the Bible, specifically?
The story of the global flood is all over the world. It's all over the globe. They all have this story. So whether you want to pull that, is it a Christian one, or is it the Sumerian one, or is it the Mayan one? It's really irrelevant, because we're talking about a global flood, right? If you want to talk about who has the right God,
those stories aren't the same story, are they?
No, they're actually not. No.
There's no story in the Mayan pictograms, the glyphs that the Mayans used to write in, that echoes exactly what the Bible says. So we're kind of and the Mayans were a long time after the biblical account of the flood was written as well. A long time. You're talking 1,000 years at least. When the Mayan civilization was around, since the story of the biblical flood was written. So I'm kind of, I'm very interested in why you think the flood is important. What brought you originally to thinking that a global flood happened? Was it because the Bible talked about a global flood? Or was it because you were seeing geological evidence that was presenting the idea of a global flood?
Yeah.
Well, the reason why I believe in the global flood is because it's scientific. The facts that we see are in line with the story of the global flood. And furthermore, I became a Christian. When I started reading the Bible and became a Christian, I said, okay, if this is true, then it's going to have to match up with not observable science, not historical or speculative science, observable science. And I went for years on this run trying to figure this all out. That's why I call you guys. It's not like one day I woke up and went, hey,
Rick,
years doing this for myself.
Rick.
That's good, Rick.
It does not match up with observable science. Geologists around the world don't come to the conclusion that the biblical account of the flood is an accurate representation of anything that's ever happened. So it doesn't match up with the science. So you've got to actually put aside the science to say that this thing happened. And that's why we have institutes out there, creationist institutes that do believe in a global flood, who dismiss mainstream science and whose work is not accepted within mainstream science because it does not match up with mainstream science. So I'm very interested in what science you've actually been reading to come to this conclusion.
I'm actually more interested in why you became a Christian, because it seems like and to follow up with Richard's point, not even to dismiss it, because it feels like the reason you were even looking for science to verify this myth is because it's important to you as a Christian for some reason. And I kind of wanted to start with that as to why you became a Christian, why you believe in the Christian God, because the understanding of this myth and the interpretation of it is, at least in your part, is predicated on that. So leading up to Richard's point, can you at least tell us about that a little?
I'd really like to go back to Richard's point to stay on topic, but I'll tell you, I became a Christian, and I've told this story, but I was a drug addict for a lot of years. And what's your master's and bachelor's degree in, by the way, Nikki?
Family Development and Child Studies.
Okay, yep. So you know about the homeless population and, at-risk populations. So you would know the majority of those people all believe in a God. They believe in a deity. You get the odd one that doesn't. Most people do. The majority as a whole of the homeless and vulnerable populations believe in a God. And it's not because
most people believe in a God.
And can I just interject there? Because, I live in Britain, and I don't think that's the case in Britain. And
he's in America. Oh, he's in Canada. Okay.
So I think,
you work in social services?
I don't work in social services, no. But I know
make
people.
An assessment like that, right?
I know people who do, and my wife has a master's degree in educational psychology and works closely with vulnerable people. So, although I don't work in it myself, I do know people who do, and I do know quite a lot of people who talk to people who work in it. And belief in a God is not a prevalent in this country, at least.
I was going to say,
and I'm not saying it's not the case where you live, but what I'm saying is that's not a universal measurement that is
America
necessarily good to use as a universal measurement, because you've got Indian cultures and things which believe in a completely different God to you. And and homelessness is not a thing there. It's actually part of society. It's not something out of the norm. It's part of society. People don't have homes. People beg all the time on the streets, and they have beliefs in gods, but they're completely different gods, and they come from completely different cultural backgrounds. So I'm not quite sure where this line of argumentation is going.
Yeah, the homeless aside, Britain, India, Canada, America, why do you believe, Rick, why do you believe in God, the Christian God? You said you were a drug addict, and I'm so sorry to hear that. That's really tough.
I was a member of that population for many years. And when you're a member of that population, especially in India, for instance, you pointed out, the predominant reason for homelessness, like you pointed out, is more society. It's not addiction or trauma. Right? Not to say we don't have that,
Sure.
Right. So when you're dealing with addiction and traumas, as far as the vulnerable populations in like the States and Canada, right, it's usually associated with drug addiction or mental health. And when you experience these things, you very quickly realize that life is not, it's not some, exciting little journey that a lot of people get to experience. It's very real and it makes no sense, right? And when you experience something like addiction, you meet Satan. You know what I mean? Like when you feel something control you like that, I mean, it's almost impossible to deny a God in that situation. Like it makes no sense. There's no explanation for it. It's spiritual warfare.
I have a question. So I want to empathize as someone who deals with mental health issues and has issues with like just kind of navigating life in very difficult times. So life is very difficult. And when you're having one of those quote unquote dark nights of the soul, I totally understand. It does feel like a spiritual issue. But is it possible that even though it's emotional and quote unquote spiritual to you, that there are biological, scientific reasons that you're going through these issues, and that's maybe where the approach should start in resolving them?
Of course, there's a biological issue going on when you deal with mental health or addiction. Of course, it's biological, but that doesn't have to take the spiritual out of it. God created biology, in my opinion, right? So
how do you know that God exists? Like, how do you know that?
Well,
because
there's tons of reasons why I know God exists. I've seen things in my own life that tell me that God exists. I know He does. It's not a question of if I think He does. What I call in to talk about is the science in the Bible, because like I said, when I opened the book, that was my journey, right? I was interested in science, so I went on that journey with it. Not every Christian does that. And like your last caller said, most Christians don't read the Bible, and I find that unfortunate for different reasons than he did.
But Rick, again, right? once again, coming back to the question I asked you previously, you've said you're interested in science, and yet everything you're stating is not believed by mainstream science. So which authorities are you going to get this information from?
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
How old is limestone? How's limestone formed scientifically? How does that work?
That's irrelevant. That's irrelevant.
To form limestone,
really
right?
is.
It's not.
Yeah, I know, but
the processes of
to form something.
Rick. The processes of geology. The processes of geology are not what I asked you a question about. My question was, where do you get the information from that you're using? Which authorities? Because mainstream geology does not accept. And I've got a good friend who's part of the ACA, who's a geologist, who's wrote geological papers. And, he certainly doesn't believe that there was a global flood. And
no, there wasn't a global flood.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is where I'm trying to come from. You saying you've got this interest in science, which is fair enough, and I applaud you for that. And you've got this belief, and you're correlating the two things. Yet mainstream science does not support the belief that you have. So where are you getting the scientific information from that is informing this belief that you're saying matches up with this belief?
Yeah.
Do you know what the word science means in the Greek? Do you know what it means?
Are you able to answer a simple question, Rick, or do you want to?
I am, but I'm explaining it to you because you don't know anything by having 10 guys tell you something. See, that's the thing. You accept it in faith. I don't.
Rick,
you're the faithful one.
No, actually, not at all.
Rick, I've muted you, Rick, because I'm going to ask you the question again, and I'd like you to answer the specific question instead of going off on a tangent onto something else. The question I asked you was, where are you getting the information from to inform your scientific belief? Because it doesn't appear to be mainstream science. You don't have to start talking to me about what science means. That's not the question I asked you. The question I asked you was, where are you getting the information from? What is the source of the geological information you are using? I have unmuted you. Feel free to answer the question.
That's what I'm telling you. It's research, right? If you want to go through it, I got it all right here. But you don't agree with
research from where? Rick,
what do you have,
Rick? Yeah. Research from where? I don't want a gish gallop of you doing research, which means you've watched a few YouTube videos. research from which journals are you reading, which have got the articles in, which are informing this opinion?
Start with your best resource.
I don't
Let's
read
take
a
that,
few.
Rick.
So you
I
don't
don't read a couple.
I don't.
I don't watch
All
a
I want you
couple
to
YouTube
do.
videos.
All I
I'm
want you.
constantly doing this. In my
Right, all I
job,
want-
I have 15
Rick,
hours a
Rick.
day sitting stationary listening to this stuff. This
Rick.
is what I do in life. Is I
Okay,
make
that's
science
great.
God,
So-
right?
Rick.
So
when you
Rick,
have-
if you don't mind, hey Rick, hey, I'm very interested to hear the resource you have. I'm like you. I put in a ton of work. I do a ton of reading, and I honestly can't recap every single resource I've searched either. But there's always that one resource that kind of sticks out to me that kind of was a pivotal point in whatever mentality or perspective I came to. So share with us your best resource. What's your best resource showing that the flood occurred and verifies it?
Okay, so when you look at radiometric dating, for instance, they've done experiments. Radiometric dating is unable to date known.
Right, Rick, I've muted you again because the question was about which resource you use. Both myself and Nikki have asked you the same question from slightly different perspectives. I asked you which journal you were using, and Nikki asked you which was your best resource. So we don't need to hear about the methods. I've already said this to you when you talked about limestone formation. We don't need to hear about the methodologies that are involved. That's not what we're talking about. We're asking about the resources you're getting your information from. So I'm going to unmute you, and I'd like you to give us the resource that you are using. And if you don't, I will drop you, because we've both asked you a couple of times now. So, Rick, what resource are you using to get your information from?
Yeah, what you got?
The resource I'm using is my brain. You want me to say which one of your lords am I citing? That's what you want me to say. But my brain.
Actually, before you drop him, Richard.
Rick has decided not to stay with us.
No, I actually wanted to ask him because he said specifically that he uses scientific research as well, which means that we use the same basis for coming to conclusions. So if that's true, then let's come to the same conclusion on the scientific research. So it's not really our Lord. It's really, if you're using scientific research, then you're using our Lord, quote unquote, then that should be something that you and I should be able to look at together and evaluate together.
And that's exactly the problem, I think, because we have got this huge body of research and this huge body of evidence. And, you know, there are countless geological journals out there with hardworking scientists who do the work and write the papers and go into the field and study the stuff. And, you know, when you spend 5 minutes, you know, approaching 10 minutes asking someone what resource they're using,
he says,
and they keep avoiding that question, it becomes very, very difficult. You know, you can't just say, well, the research is my brain, because that means nothing. That's not a very particularly useful resource that we can go to. And like you said, we can look at and we can share that information and we can get that information. It's out there. So, Rick,
sure, and then we can talk about it together and read through the resource. I was ready. I'm Googling myself. I mean, let's go through it. But I think, and that's why I wanted to ask him just kind of how he came to the conclusion regarding his religious belief, because only with that predicate are you even able to move into the ridiculous concept that a global flood occurred, according to the Bible's depiction. So that's, we tried, I guess.
Rick, I implore you next time to actually go out and pick up some geological journals that talk about, and you can do this, you can do this research on the internet. It is available. Get a subscription to a geological journal. You can search them for flood events in the past, and come back with that information and use the actual science, because I'm not convinced that what you're calling the science that you do the research in, and what myself and Nikki are calling the science that we understand to be the science, are necessarily the same things. So if we're going to have a coherent conversation, we need to be on the same page with the resources we're using. Nikki, are you ready to take another call?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready.
Let's take Jeffrey, him from Georgia.
Oh, Jeff's and Wesley's are rolling hard today. I love that. Hi, Jeff. Oh, shout out, fellow Georgian. Shout out, excuse me. Hey.
Yeah, so I had actually called in before, and it was a call about me saying that God existed. However, I got into this conversation, and the person asked me if I think that well-being is a good basis for like a subjective morality. And I told him that I wasn't sure, and he said to call back when I was sure. And so I have decided, I think that well-being is a terrible way to base subjective morality, because it only makes it to where it's based off of your judgment as opposed to the judgment of, you know, a tradition that goes back thousands of years. A tradition that I would say was invented by God, but, you know, someone like you might just say was invented by cavemen.
But it's not. First of all, I think.
Where are we going with that?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's important to stress that it's not just an individual. It's societies at large, you know, on the whole, which decide kind of where, you know, what well-being is. And, you know, each country has different ideas and, you know, slightly different ideas about that. And, you know, different cultures. Yeah, there are some universal things. And, you know, I was going to get to that. But when you look on it, I think it's very difficult to say it's on an individual basis, because what I consider well-being, what for me, may not be exactly the same as what somebody in India considers well-being for them. So, you know, we can there are broad things, but there are objective truths which affect that. So we all know that we die. We all know that we suffer. We all know that there are things that objectively affect us, and those objective things inform that subjectivity. So it's not just a case of Richard says this and Nikki, who's 5,000 miles away, says this, and that they are completely different individual truths. They are connected to these objective truths that are out there.
Yeah, I actually don't even see the difference between, well, it's always been curious to me how, I'm assuming you're a Christian, you can claim, well, being in Georgia, I pretty much know you are, claiming that Christianity is a source of objective morality when it's not. Because we're all on the same page. We all have to work concurrently.
To be Christianity. Oh, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Well, you're good. It's a little bit of a delay. But yeah, I think we're all kind of in the same boat, and we have to work together to find out what is morally beneficial for the majority as much as possible. And I think what you're saying is you don't think well-being is the best way to do that?
Yeah, and I am also saying that I like that you came from the angle that I sounded too individualistic, because I am sort of coming from the angle that determining morality based on well-being is an individualistic mindset. And so I really think that if you just have morality based on something as vague as well-being, there's no way to make society conform to what you want your morality to be, because I don't really view morality as a personal choice. I more view it as like something society forces on you, which is good. I'm not saying that makes it bad.
Actually, I think well-being is an excellent parameter for moral, moral decisions. And this is because my well-being is directly affected by your well-being. Because let's say you work at the electric company and you get hurt by someone who's acted immorally towards you. Maybe, I don't know, they steal your car, like someone stole my car and you can't get to work and you can't operate the electrical grid. And there, I can't get online with him. I can't have these lights. I can't have those things. Let's say that you are an internet provider. Let's say you're Xfinity and you work there, but your well-being is affected and you can't get to work. You're affecting my well-being. So your well-being is directly correlated to my well-being. We live in a society together. And if you're not doing well, I'm not doing well. I can't do all of this on my own. So I think your well-being is very important to me. I need you, Jeff, to do well because you work at the electrical company and you make sure my lights are on. So if you're not doing well, I'm not doing well. So I think, I guess I'm trying to understand, I guess maybe why that's not enough, or maybe what else should be added?
Well, what if someone's well-being were bad for the well-being of society? Like, say, if they were a class of people that needed to be oppressed. Like, if you lived in a society that had slaves, you wouldn't want to feel that way towards slaves. And I'm not saying slavery is justified. I'm using them as an example of the existing social order. And there's a lot of people out there who their well-being is bad for society.
But this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that well-being isn't just a case of what we believe as either an individual or society. It's based on objective truths. And we know that those objective truths are bad. We know that owning someone as a slave is an objectively bad thing. It's not a good thing to do in any way, shape, or form, and it's never been a good thing to do for the person who's been owned as a slave throughout history. So, that's an objectively bad thing, and we know that, and that informs the subjectivity of the kind of society that comes out, and how that forms things. And even during kind of the American slavery period, there were people all the way throughout that who objected to it because they knew it was bad, even though society as a whole said it was good. The people understood that it was objectively bad to own people as slaves.
And those were subjective perspectives, but then we lead to an objection. And that was okay. So I have to discuss this a lot in my debates and with others as well. The subjective perspective, of course, with the goal being well-being and making sure everyone's lives are maximally well, the objective, that idea is subjective, but the objective is to make sure we live in a society that is cohesive and coherent and we can work together. So with that objective, we do have objective morality and objective truths that we can use to work together. I don't know if I summarized that correctly, but continue, Jeff.
But there's a lot of people who would want to change society. And I really think that the perfect society would be one that is static and never changes. And so,
the world isn't static or ever changing. The world changes all the time, and the world will either move you or remove you.
We need to wrap in a second because we are approaching the end of the show. I really wanted to try and dig down and ask you a little bit about what kind of why you think specifically your religious scripture inspires objective morality. But I'm not entirely sure we're going to have time to do that today. What I'd like you to do is, if you don't mind, call the show back. And I know you've talked to us before, and specifically to go down that route, but I want to just we'll touch on it for just a minute, just to kind of get the juices flowing ready for next time. And just kind of in a minute or less, just kind of give us a few lines as to why you think the Bible inspires objective morality.
Yeah, well, God wrote the Bible, so God says so.
He did.
And
did he sit down on his laptop and type it up?
I'm about to say something that's different. That could be true even if God were fictional, because what matters is not that he literally wrote it, but the narrative that he did. And so I am not actually saying that God literally wrote the Bible. I'm more just saying because authority figure said so is a good basis for tradition.
So the argument from authority?
Yeah, basically.
So if Hitler is your authority, forgive me for bringing up the most cliche example ever. If Hitler is your authority and says we should wipe out all the Jews, wipe out all the homosexuals, wipe out all the people of color and their dogs, is that the authority we should work with? Or even, forget Hitler. Let's go with the God of the Bible who did the exact same thing. Is that the authority we should work with?
I mean, I'm not saying you should actively do it, but working against it is just adding to the chaos of the world. And chaos is a bad thing.
But there's chaos even if we don't work against it. So are you saying that the authorities that be 200 years ago and I'm going to play this card, enslaved my ancestors. If my ancestors didn't go up against that would just be instigating chaos. I should have just left it.
Yeah, but they also shouldn't have enslaved anyone.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, they did, though. That's the thing. So the authorities that be,
they
they
did.
made the choice to enslave people. So are you saying that the slaves should not have insurrected and they should have just left it as is because it would have incited chaos?
Yeah. Yes.
You're saying no, left it as is?
Well, yeah, because like think of all of the death and destruction that caused in Haiti.
I'm talking about 200 years ago slavery.
Yeah, I am
because
too.
we were talking.
Or maybe I have my dates wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's 200 years ago.
So are you saying that in order to leave things like as calm as possible, we should have never fought for freedom?
Yeah, like regardless of what the current social order is, if you just stick to tradition, society will stay stable.
I don't want to stably be a slave.
On that note, Jeffrey, I think we are running out of time. I think we're going to have to save this one for another call. Please call us back. Please call us back with this because it's really interesting, and I'd like to go into a little bit more detail in the kind of biblical morality and kind of compare that as a worldview. But you know, it's always difficult when you start getting into the slavery conversation, and it's one I try and avoid when talking about biblical morality because there are other examples that are talked about much less. That you know. I think
that's true. But when he said about like not upsetting the boat, I was thinking, what about, you know, the people who are enslaved and their children? Because this is still affecting people. Like,
and when we talk about slavery, and Christians like to bring up, you know, it was Christians who fought for the end of slavery, but there's also quite a lot of books written by Christians. Condoning slavery as well, but that's for another time. We're at the end of the show. You know, as Nikki, it's been fantastic to have you on. Thank you for
so
joining
much for
us.
having me back. I hope to come back again soon.
Yeah, hopefully it'd be really good to have you back on again. The question for this week is: summarize the God of the Bible in 4 words, and reply in the comments. And tune in next week to hear the top 3 answers. You, Nikki, you are the guest. So how can people find out a little bit more about you?
So you guys can find me on Twitter at Beat the Cult. I will be getting my Instagram back up and running, given my most recent events with my life. The Patreon and the store will be coming back in the next week. So please definitely follow me on Patreon. It is a simple tier. It will really help me out. Just kind of with life, the way things are going right now. I have too much pride to start a GoFundMe, so just toss me $5, you know, put it towards a down payment. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, follow me there. YouTube, absolutely. I have a weekly podcast. I'm having Mikey Famine on Monday, so you guys know Mikey. Definitely check it out. And yeah, I'm always around. So yeah, you can find me pretty much on any platform.
If you would like to support the ACA, you can do that by going below the chat. We have a fundraiser, which 100% of the proceeds go directly to the ACA. YouTube doesn't charge any fees for that. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can become a member. Click the join button below the video. Support us on Patreon, and that's at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And we now have a channel that houses all of the ACA shows in audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. You can become a part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. And if you would like to continue the discussion after the show, join us in the ACD, our fan run Discord server at tiny.cc/ACA Discord. Also, make sure to check out the newest version of the ACA show, The Non-Profits, which will air at 3 p.m. Central Time today at tiny.cc/YTNP. We have a wonderful crew who keeps us going. You know, they're the ones who put the show together. Let's go to the crew cam and see the people who do the actual work rather than the people who get to sit here and have all the fun. Are we having a crew cam? Yes, there they are. Look at those lovely people. They're the ones that keep us all going and torment me on a weekly basis. And let me assure you, that is a thing as Nikki has witnessed today. Let's send Nikki. Let's send some love rings out. I'm sure this is the bit you've been waiting for. Let's send those love rings out to our wonderful, wonderful viewers. We do appreciate you. We really, really do appreciate the viewers. As I said at the top of the show, I've got COVID now. We've just come out of a pandemic, and there are people who have, they've been essential workers. And that it doesn't matter whether you're a believer or a non-believer. If you're an essential worker, we really do thank you for the work you've done keeping people safe. It is very, very important. And, we were talking about society, morals and things in this episode. And, it doesn't matter whether you're a believer or a believer. You come together. Everybody's come together through the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. And there have been new challenges to face coming out of the pandemic as well. Everybody working together. If you don't believe, this is your community. We've got so many fan-run resources and ACA resources for you. Go and search those out and talk to the community. There are places for you to talk. And if you do believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced. We will see you next time.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.